Good evening, everyone. This is Stone Gas Man live from New York City. And tonight I will be doing an audio commentary for the 1946 film The Best Years of Our Lives, starring William Wyler and written by Robert E. Sherwood, starring Dana Andrews, Frederic March, Myrna, and Cathy O'Donnell and Virginia Mayo. Now, I'm going to say it right now. I've been doing commentaries on this YouTube channel for the last 6 months now. And while I initially had no intention of actually doing a commentary for my #1 movie of all time, I felt like, now is the appropriate time and everything to do it, because I don't think anybody's ever done a commentary on this movie. I don't think anybody. It's never been. There was never a recorded commentary for any of the physical media, and I don't believe that. I think I'm pretty sure I'm the first one to do an audio commentary for the best years of our lives. Here again, even if it's on a YouTube channel that not many people watch, but at the same time, I want to welcome you all for joining me tonight, and I'll give you all about 3 minutes to pause, sync up your copies of Best Years of Our Lives, where I have it paused right at Samuel Goldwyn Presents. So I'm going to give everybody about 3 minutes to sync up their copies, whether you're watching it on Amazon or whether you're watching it on YouTube. A word of warning, there is a free version to watch on YouTube. However, it doesn't have the opening titles, which, they last approximately a minute long. It's not a huge deal, I guess, but at the same time, I mean, if you want to see this movie how it was seen in 1946, which is part of the reason why I do these commentaries, is you preferably want to watch the entire movie, 170 minutes worth, including the opening credits. Now, throughout this commentary, I'm going to be touching upon a lot of things. I'll be talking about the actors. I'll be talking about the screenwriter, Robert E. Sherwood, the director, the Oscars that it won, the awards that it won around the world, and also some personal experiences in terms of how I discovered this movie and how it made a massive impact on my life. I mean, it basically inspired me to choose the Navy among the armed services that were that are available to join up for right after high school. And I decided to choose the Navy specifically because of Harold Russell's performance in this movie. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, for those, on Twitter, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are well aware that for the past 8 months, I have been working on a book dedicated to the best years of our lives and the making of it. And I want to have it about 37 chapters, the rationale being that it's number 37 on the AFI's top 100 movies. And even for its 10th anniversary, it didn't change from the number 37 spot. I mean, luckily it managed to retain all the votes that it had up until that time, and that it didn't go down. I mean, I'm just thankful it didn't go down. There were a lot of movies that went up and went down on that list, but thankfully, the best years of our lives wasn't one of them. And like I said, throughout the commentary, I'll talk about my experiences in watching this movie and showing it to different people and everything. And it's kind of a shame that this movie, even though it's not necessarily obsolete at this point, the truth of the matter is that, I mean, really, not enough people see it, and it's aside from occasional showings on Turner Classic Movies, I mean, you don't really see it play on commercial television. You don't really see it readily available for streaming at most websites, which here again is also a shame. But at any rate, so I think what we will do go ahead and get started here. I'm paused at Samuel Goldwyn Presents, and we will count down from 3 to start the best years of our lives here. So countdown from 3, 2, 1, and play. And I am watching this movie on the Warner Blu-ray, which, it's nothing spectacular, but it is what it is. The quality, the picture commentary for quality is the best it's ever been, even though apparently prior to this Blu-ray release, like two of the last original prints were unfortunately got lost or destroyed on the way to the Warner offices from the Samuel Goldwyn Company, which is kind of a shame. Here again, I mean, this movie, there's a lot of tragedies connected to it, but aside from the fact that, the fact is that we still have it and we can still view it, it's really all that matters. Director of photography, Greg Toland. He is the man that shot Citizen Kane, among other things, and he wanted to shoot this through the lens of honesty. And as we open up on the airport here, as you can see, every single person in this airport is able to be seen very, very clearly because of the photography. His deep focus is one of the things that will strike out to many as we watch this. Now, this, of course, is Dana Andrews playing this captain in the Air Force, and he's just arrived home from World War II. I mean, the fighting has pretty much officially ceased, and we are following him as he makes his way back to his hometown of Boone City, which is basically a nondescript town anywhere in the American Midwest, although it's patterned after Cincinnati, Ohio. And as you can see, even the people in the back, every single person's face is almost perfectly in focus, the ones that we see up in the front here. Little bit of a dismissal, apparently. I mean, the loutish customer with 16 pounds excess baggage, he should go on his way, but we don't really care about the Air Force captain that just came in. But now he gets sent to the ATC, which is near the airport. Now, as Fred Derry, played by Dana Andrews, comes in here, you will see a corporal at the table on the left of Dana Andrews, and that is, in fact, 23-year-old Blake Edwards, who had acted in a number of movies during this time, long before he became a director. There he is saying about, I guess I'm going to Cleveland. Blake Edwards, of course, later married Julie Andrews, and he was the director of Days of Wine and Roses, Breakfast at Tiffany's, the Pink Panther movies. But I personally think his masterpieces from 1979, 10, starring Dudley Moore and Julie Andrews and Bo Derek, who later became very, very active in Veterans Affairs, and even served as the honorary head of the Veteran Affairs at one point. But Bo Derek is a massive, massive fan of veterans. And going away from that, here we have sitting in the chair, Mr. Harold Russell in his Navy uniform. And as you can see, he has his hands in his pockets. We don't know why yet. And there's never, ever a subtle clue as to why that is. But they're just, they both come up to the counter because they just found out, there's a B-17 that's able to stop in Boone City, so we can drop you guys off. So they're signing their way to be able to get home. And we soon realize that Harold Russell, in place of his hands, has hooks. And most people that have seen Best Years of Our Lives and know the history of it, they know that Harold Russell, of course, was not a professional actor, that the producer, Samuel Goldwyn, and director William Wyler had discovered him in an Army training film called Diary of a Sergeant, which is available on YouTube, thank goodness. I mean, that's the type of extra feature that you would expect to be on a deluxe Blu-ray or 4K edition of a classic movie, but unfortunately we don't not have that yet, and we don't know when we will. So, but I'll talk about that more later. But here we also get introduced to the third veteran. This is, of course, about three veterans returning home from World War II at the exact same time to their hometown of Boone City. And the third veteran is played by Frederic March. And Frederic March, of course, was a contract player for Paramount for many, many years. He started out in 1929. And actually, ironically enough, he had actually started out as a banker. And then he also served in World War One. So he's actually a veteran of the First World War, which makes him, considering his background, I think that he was the quintessential choice to play this character. Now, this footage that you see of them flying over, this is later where we're going to see like the stadium and other landmarks and stuff like that. That is actually Cincinnati that they're flying over. But a lot of this footage was shot in late March of 1946, only weeks before the final script was approved. And as many people on Twitter, I decided to show everybody on Twitter my most prized possession, and I will show it to you all right now. Is I happen to have in my possession an original 1946 screenplay dated April 9th, 1946, along with a number of changes. This is, in fact, The Best Years of Our Lives, a script by Robert E. Sherwood, dated for April 9th, 1946, with many, many changes. I got this from the executor of Dana Andrews' estate, who apparently he had this script in his possession after it had been sitting in a RKO vault for more than 50 years. So that is one of my most prized possessions. And I wanted to actually open it up and read from it a lot, but the problem is that because I'm trying to preserve the script as much as possible, I'm not going to be opening it that much. But that's something I wanted to share with all of you in terms of that. I just want to say hi to Joe Pob Tarheel in the chat, who just started commenting. Yes, 10 is so funny, and yes, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think it is. I'm very much here again. This is my #1 movie of all time, and when I saw the script was available, I had to get it. So, but anyway, going back to the movie, here we are with the three veterans as they're flying in this B-17 going home, and Harold Russell playing a character named Homer Parrish, although. Let's be perfectly clear that Homer Parrish is essentially Harold Russell. Much of what you see in this movie of Homer Parrish mirrors Harold's actual life and what he went through when he went home. Because I mean, during the production of this movie, he actually married his high school sweetheart. So, there's a lot of verisimilitude in this movie in terms of not only perfectly reflecting everything that was going on after World War II in the United States, but also specifically to what Harold Russell and these other two veterans were going through as a microcosm of everything at the time. The way this started, the way this all initiated, and we got some lovely shots of the sky and the clouds here as the Captain Fred Derry and Frederic March's character are talking and getting to know each other. But how this started was basically the wife of Samuel Goldwyn, his second wife, actually read an article in Time magazine about returning Marines, and they actually had a son who was serving as well, and so yeah, she asked her husband, "Hey, why don't we make a movie about men returning home from World War II, and the plight and their plights and their struggles and everything," which of course, I mean, to be perfectly honest, nothing has really changed since this movie. I mean, and this is part of the reason why this film had such a profound impact on the rest of the world, because it wasn't just honoring American veterans; it was honoring veterans all over the world, and that's part of the reason why it had such a profound healing effect. Um, as we will see with many of these heart-wrenching scenes that will be coming here pretty soon. But here we have a very a strong sense of worry that, oh my God, well, what if their women don't accept them? What if society doesn't accept them? I mean, you saw how Fred was treated at the airport. You know, he was basically brushed aside. You know, sorry, we got a waiting list. We gotta stay true to the waiting list here. But I remember seeing this movie for the first time, and when Harold Russell was, looking out, at the sky from this B-17, and he'd never been up in an airplane before, so this is dead on in terms of its his reaction and the accuracy here. Harold Russell had actually published two biographies after this movie came out, because the film, by the way, it won 9 Oscars. It was the #1 box office hit since Gone with the Wind, and it won 9 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Music, Best Screenplay for Robert E. Sherwood. And Harold Russell ended up getting 2 Oscars. He not only he got a Special Academy Award for bringing hope and courage to his fellow veterans, because the Academy Board thought he had no chance of winning Best Supporting Actor against seasoned actors like Claude Rains, and people like that, and they just thought he didn't have a chance. So, but he ended up winning Best Supporting Actor anyway. They practically threw him out on the stage, and in his book he talks about how he was holding both the Oscars in his hooks on the stage, saying, it's not what you've lost, but what you have left that counts. And there's a great little episode where he talks about in his book where he was, the crowd of reporters were trying to get him to talk to him and interview and everything. And somebody he didn't even know, who was connected to the industry, he just took him in a dressing room, gave him a swig of his alcohol, whatever he had, and said, okay, you need to take a break from all this and take a sip of this. And then the guy left, and it calmed him down actually enough to where he was be able to go out there and soak up all the glory that he was getting. Now, this montage right here, Robert E. Sherwood actually wrote from personal experience in terms of capturing how things had changed, but at the same time looked exactly the same as they come back. And by the way, William Wyler actually served along with Robert E. Sherwood. Both served in World War II as well. And William Wyler, when he won the Oscar for directing Mrs. Miniver in 1942 for MGM, he was actually already shooting documentaries abroad like Memphis Belle, where he lost his hearing. He was actually permanently damaged in his right ear. And that was part of the reason why he wanted to make this movie so badly, was to showcase what veterans were going through. And as you can see, also the deep focus photography, where you can see the men in the rear view mirror, the cab. It's wonderful. Now, this is the end of the first act. And I want to. I mean, there's a lot of famous people in Hollywood who love this picture and gave it nothing but praise. But I think the one that stands out the most is actually Billy Wilder, because this was a director that had no time for sentiment. He had no time for schmaltz. He resisted the idea of ever getting humane or emotional in a movie. You know, he was just that cynical. And the year before this, he had directed The Lost Weekend, which brought alcoholism back into mainstream movies. And Best Years had embraced that, as we will see later on. But he said that this, when people saw this in the theater, that the entire audience was drenched in tears, and that's a magnificent accomplishment, considering we're not even 20 minutes into the movie. I mean, when you already have an entire audience full of people just, you know, crying their eyes out at these homecoming scenes. I mean, not only have you grabbed your audience at that point, but you've accomplished something that not other many other movies are able to accomplish, which is, it's pretty extraordinary. I mean, Billy Wilder said it was one of the best directed movies he'd ever seen, and he actually started crying himself when he was talking about seeing Best Years of Our Lives. And as you can see, I mean, you know, with no words, I mean, you could see the mother is, you know, devastated at the sight that is before her, and the father, you know, just trying to, trying to make sure it doesn't explode or anything. But yeah, but he's finally home after so many years of fighting overseas, and of course, losing his hands in the process. Thank you very much, Cliff. I really appreciate you coming as well. You got to hand it to the Navy. They sure trained that kid how to use those hooks. Yeah, but they couldn't train him to put his arms around his girl to stroke her hair. That's a wonderful, wonderful Robert E. Sherwood dialogue. Now, the next homecoming scene, however, is the one that seems to be shown in, you know, any classic film reel. I mean, for some reason, they never show the Harold Russell homecoming, but they always show the Frederic March homecoming, and they're both equally powerful scenes. The Harold Russell, excuse me, the Frederic March one is the one that happens to get the most play, it seems like. But there's this witty exchange where Dana Andrews asks him if he's a retired bootlegger, and no, he's actually a banker. And he grabs his stuff out of the cab, and I love this. I mean, even though they're different ages, I mean, you know, they both have nothing but absolute respect for each other. I mean, that, you know, the salute is almost, you know, it's almost irrelevant at this point, because they're just there. They're back to get a handle on reality and how things have changed over the years, and to start over, essentially. Here's another example of society not seeing what's right in front of them, which is, somebody in military uniform comes back after the war. I mean, you would think that, they were going home to see somebody, but like, they always have to question everything, especially even if they're wearing a military uniform. Frederic March, like I said, started out at Paramount Pictures in the late 1920s. And his first film was actually a film called The Wild Party with Clara Bow, where he teaches at this all-women's college, and he starts having a fling with Clara Bow, it was really just a vehicle for Clara Bow's talents, to be perfectly honest, to see if she could actually survive into the sound era. And a couple years after, or actually 1 year after the Wild Party, Frederic March made another movie with her called True to the Navy, where Frederic March actually played a Navy sailor, and Clara Bow apparently was having, plenty of flings with Navy sailors that would come into her restaurant or whatever. And it's an amusing little film from 1930. But yeah, this is one of the most famous scenes in movie history, where Greg Toland's photography, catches them both, in focus in between the two children, which we'll talk about here. This long, loving, lingering shot of Frederic March and Myrna Loy in embrace. Myrna Loy was actually the one giving top billing for The Best Years of Our Lives. And she had started out with Frederic March over at Paramount. Myrna Loy actually started at Universal, and she actually started out even before Frederic March did. I mean, she had done dozens of movies in the 20s, usually playing Oriental or exotic women, those kind of types of roles where the dialogue wasn't really didn't really matter. It was more about how she presented herself and seduced the audience into whatever was going on in the movie. And of course, this is Theresa Wright, who plays their daughter. And Theresa Wright had actually won an Academy Award for William Wyler's Mrs. Miniver, which came out 4 years before this. She was the daughter of Greer Garson and Walter Pidgeon. And sadly, she dies in the movie. I mean, there's a shot where she and her mother are in the car driving, and they get hit. And unfortunately, Theresa Wright loses her life. But luckily, she's back for every minute of The Best Years of Our Lives, so we can enjoy her performance here. Although, strangely enough, it's interesting is that all the men got awards for Best Years of Our Lives, with the exception of Greg Toland, who wasn't even nominated, which is a little eyebrow raising. I haven't really been able to come up with an explanation for that, but Myrna Loy was not nominated for Best Actress. Theresa Wright was not nominated for Best Supporting Actress. Nor were Virginia Mayo or Cathy O'Donnell. None of the women were nominated, and I don't have any explanation for that, aside from the fact that, well, we already had women who were giving performances that year that needed to be recognized. I mean, as most people know, Best Actress for this year was Olivia de Havilland for Teach His Own. And then Best Supporting Actress was actually Anne Baxter for The Razor's Edge. Best Original Screenplay went to The Seventh Veil, while Best Adapted Screenplay went to Robert E. Sherwood, of course. And but Best Years of Our Lives pretty much picked up all the other Oscars that it was up for, which is pretty impressive. Now, the interesting thing about Dana Andrews' Homecoming as compared to Frederic March's and Harold Russell's is that there's no music. It's very empty. It's very he comes home to this lower middle class existence where his father is married to another woman, and that he refers to by her first name, Hortense. There's not really any like real strong mother-son relationship there, because his father married her later. And he finds out that, of course, his wife, who was evidently staying there for a short amount of time, she had now gotten a nightclub at works at a nightclub somewhere in downtown, and so he has to now go on a quest to find her and obviously be reunited with her. Even though his father, obviously very poignantly wants him to stay and, talk about his experiences, like Frederic March is doing here with his son. Now, I need to talk about him now because he's going to be leaving the movie soon, and we're never going to see him again. But the actor playing Rob Stevenson is an actor by the name of Michael Hall. And he passed away just last year at the age of 91. And I honestly had no idea what happened to him until an article showed up in the Apollo International Art Magazine last June, which was honoring his memory as a committed connoisseur and unforgettable character. And I'm quoting about Michael Hall, who plays Rob Stevenson here. Most of his friends in the art world came to know him after he had given up his youthful career as an actor, most notably playing the son of Frederic March's Sergeant Al Stevenson in The Best Years of Our Lives, William Wyler's masterpiece of 1946. I always wondered why his character dropped out of the story too early, before several scenes in which he logically should have appeared. Michael explained that his contract had ended while the film was still being shot, and that the producer, the legendary Samuel Goldwyn, refused to pay anything extra to rehire him. Michael retained a number of glamorous friends from these years, most notably Paulette Goddard, the on-screen foil and one-time wife of Charlie Chaplin, and her husband, the novelist Eric Maria Remarque, and the thespian couple Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester. A friendship with Marion Davies granted Hall access to objects in the vast collection of her lover, William Randolph Hearst, as it was being dissolved. Now, real quick, I do want to point out, here's another wonderful example of Toland's deep focus photography as we see Myrna Loy perfectly in shot between Theresa Wright and Frederic March. I mean, it's extraordinary. And even though, what they're saying is just as important as how she's reacting. But yeah, Michael Hall would only be in a couple more scenes after this. I mean, yeah, we see him again at the breakfast table and right before he leaves for school. We don't even see him at the climactic wedding. So he pretty much disappears from the movie. But just to finish this real quick is that the spoils included several important early Chinese stone sculptures and the purported marriage bed of the 16th century Florentine noblewoman Maria Salviati, on which Hall subsequently slept for many years. Hearst's acquisitive obsession was immortalized in the character of Charles Foster Kane in Citizen Kane. Michael knew Orson Welles and claimed to have coached him in a German accent. He loved the company of personalities as large as his own, and later in life he became a close friend and travel companion of the heiress Doris Duke. So if anybody wants to learn more about Michael Hall, this is probably the best you could probably find on him. And I'll provide the link to that article so you can read it. Because here again, nobody really knew what happened to him. I had certainly wondered, what had happened, because he didn't do a lot more in Hollywood after that. And so when he completely disappeared, I occasionally looked online for any stories about him, but I didn't even know anything until this article came out last year. So yeah, Michael Hall was an artist and a collector, and he ran his gallery from a series of progressively larger apartments and townhouses that he occupied on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, each of them filling to bursting with ever-growing collections. So, at any rate, that's Michael Hall for you, for anybody that wants to learn more about him. But like I said, he's going to be gone from the movie within just a few more blinks here. Frederic March and Myrna Loy were probably two of the best actors you could have chosen to play this couple, because they were already Hollywood veterans by this time. They were beloved among audiences and Hollywood itself. I mean, Myrna Loy, she broke out because of the Thin Man films, which actually, up until this point in 1946, that 5 were made, and then she finally made the 6th and final Thin Man film approximately 1 year after Best Years of Our Lives. But she Myrna Loy also did great stuff like The Mask of Fu Manchu with Boris Karloff. The Rains Came in 1939 with Tyrone Power, which won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. But for some reason, Myrna Loy herself never won an Oscar. I mean, the thing is, I mean, with Olivia de Havilland this year, I mean, it was really obvious because of how she fought the studios and getting more freedom. It worked out surprisingly well. I can understand why she won the Oscar, but why Loy didn't even get a nomination is beyond me. But I have to mention during the sequence, because I'm not exactly sure where he appears, but somewhere in the sequence is Tennessee Ernie Ford, who was a quote-unquote hillbilly singer at the time. In this bit right here, he's somewhere in here. I can't really call any of these guys out for being Tennessee Ernie Ford, but he's supposed to be a nightclub extra or singer somewhere. So, but Tennessee Ernie Ford was a musician, and he was known for like hillbilly humor, essentially, and he's most famous for being in several episodes of I Love Lucy, where he goes to visit the Ricardos up in New York City, and then eventually when they drive to California, the Ricardos want to avoid him, so they drive as fast as they can through this town, and but unfortunately they realized, oh no, we're now in jail because of speeding, and Tennessee Ernie Ford has to get us out. So, but he's supposed to be an extra somewhere in that sequence. May not be as big a fact as Blake Edwards appearing in the first 15 minutes, but hey, Best Years of Our Lives still has plenty more to offer aside from Blake Edwards and Tennessee Ernie Ford in small roles. I love this little girl too. But I mean, as you can see, I mean, here again, all because of Harold Russell's quote unquote acting, is that you could tell that he's not really comfortable, that he knows that, people are staring at his hooks, and that this is going to be our reality moving forward, that he is disabled, that he doesn't know what he's going to do in terms of work, or what he's going to be doing in the future. And he picks up this lemonade glass, and just the simple the simplicity of him dropping a lemonade glass is enough to let him know that he really just needs to get out of there for a while. He needs to get out of there, go to a familiar place where he can drown out his feelings. And what better place to do that than Butch is? I mean, he has to go down there and say hi to him. But as you can see, the family's kind of shaken about why did he have to leave, The lovely Cathy O'Donnell. We'll talk about more about her and her scenes with Harold Russell. But for right now, we're about to meet another musician aside from Tennessee Ernie Ford. This time it's Hoagy Carmichael, who is going to be showing up playing the piano in Butch's place. Oh, he plays the part of Butch. Come in, driver. Have one with us. Like I said, this was only a year after the Lost Weekend, where drinking became more prevalent in motion pictures again after Prohibition and the Volstead Act changed all that. But this was, in 1946, this was considered, as realistic as it got. This was as realistic as motion pictures got in 1946. And I think people were still are shocked that a movie like this came out of Hollywood. And the funny thing is, this was a completely independent production. Samuel Goldwyn had his own company. While it was distributed by RKO, it was really a Samuel Goldwyn movie in every respect from his studio. And they produced it on a budget of $2 million. It took about 4 months to shoot, 3 to 4 months to shoot. Now, of course, this is Hoagy Carmichael. He gave up a career as a lawyer to dedicate his life to composing and conducting music, known for playing the piano and jazz. And he wrote many hits, but 4 songs which seem to be recorded the most and are the most famous are Stardust, Georgia on My Mind, The Nearness of You, and Heart and Soul. And he was nominated for an Oscar the same year as Best Years of Our Lives, but for another movie called Canyon Passage, where he composed a song called Old Buttermilk Sky, which was actually another Western with Dana Andrews, if anybody's interested in that. But Hoagy Carmichael, he would also eventually win the award with longtime collaborator Johnny Mercer for his lyrics in The Cool Cool of the Evening for the 1951 film Here Comes the Groom. And his first film, he also did acting, as you can see, and his first film was actually the ghost comedy Topper with Cary Grant. And by the mid-1940s, he was doing incredibly successful as a songwriter, and for Decca Records and V-Disc. And V-Disc was known as the armed service label for servicemen stationed overseas. So he did his part with the war effort by actually just composing music for veterans. So yeah, this is really the first time that the gang is all together. I mean, they've all by chance have come down to Butch's, the very first night that they get home, and we got the Navy to convoy us. Exactly. I mean, even when I saw, and I'm gonna talk about my experience with this film soon, but a lot of these scenes are played for laughs, and then they ring true. I mean, switching the glasses, just little subtle things like that Frederic March and Dana Andrews' reaction. It's like, wait a minute. What, aren't you drinking? What's the problem, Now, Hoagy Carmichael playing Butch is obviously a very concerned relative because, Wilma, his girlfriend just called wondering where he's at and everything. And, I mean, I love it when he actually, denies him the chance to have, straight up whiskey. Instead, no, you're just going to drink beer tonight, Homer. I mean, you just need beer. You don't need anything else. You don't need anything stronger. What made you leave the house to get them all worried? It's really, the struggles that these guys go through, is particularly Harold Russell, are universal, because as Roger Ebert said in his 2006 review of Best Years of Our Lives, when he added this to his great movies list, is that so long as we have wars, we will always have veterans, and we will always have veterans struggling after those wars. And now, admittedly, this was not the first film to showcase PTSD, but it really showed exactly how it was affecting Captain Fred Derry, especially with his nightmares and everything that we will see later. And also, I should mention, even though my knowledge of music is pretty limited, but when Harold Russell sits down and asks him, can you play Lazy River? in 1930, Hoagy Carmichael actually did a song called Up the Lazy River, but I can't say for sure if it's the same song, unfortunately. Okay, now I'll go ahead and start saying right now that when I discovered this movie, it was purely because of the fact that I had become a massive movie buff as a teenager. What had happened was is that after I saw Dances with Wolves on the big screen in 1990, I had started watching silent films. I started watching Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and then I would watch other classics that we would have on video, like the James Cagney gangster films, or the Billy Wilder films of the 50s and the 60s, Stanley Kubrick movies. I was already watching Stanley Kubrick movies by the time I was 12, 13 years old. And by the time I left the house, I mean, we had a VHS collection of what must have been, oh my God, over 1,000 tapes. But this came about under very unusual circumstances because I had just agreed to join the military after high school, and I didn't know which branch of service to specifically join. I mean, all I know is that I was going to graduate from high school with a D plus average, and I did get a college education later, but I mean, thankfully, because of the GI Bill. But when I graduated from high school, I mean, I had very low prospects about what I was going to do and where I was going to go. So, granted, partly out of convenience, I joined the military. But I must emphasize that I had also learned at that point that I had a long military lineage going all the way back to the Revolutionary War. I mean, my mother was in the Daughters of the American Revolution, and thus I was in the Children of the American Revolution. And the requirement for being in that organization is that you need to have an ancestor who fought during the American Revolution, and that, in fact, I do. However, what was more profound upon me watching this movie, which I found in my father's private collection, by the way. My father was an English teacher for 20 years, and he had a private collection of tapes that weren't dirty necessarily. They were movies that he would show to his classes. Um, Films like the Scarlet Letter television version with Meg Foster from 1979, or other adaptations like Candide or Moby Dick, or those kind of things. And he had in there The Best Years of Our Lives, and I had never seen it before. And thankfully, because of Leonard Maltin's book, I found out exactly what it was, and that uh, not only did he give it this movie 4 stars, his top rating, but he also said that this movie was still powerful today. So I watched it at 1 o'clock in the morning. Apparently, my father had recorded it off of HBO, of all places, in the mid 1980s. We never had cable, so I can only assume he did it illegally. But anyway, I watched The Best Years of Our Lives and had such a profound and powerful reaction to it that ultimately I discovered that, hey, because Harold Russell, because of his performance, quote unquote, I decided to join the United States Navy, and I ended up joining in 1997, and I served in the Navy until 2006. And I had shown the movie to several people in the military. In fact, in Chicago, when I was attending A school, I had arranged to show the movie at a place where basically, the sailors would go to watch movies after work or whatever when they had nothing else to do. And, like the number one movie that would usually be asked to be shown is something like Con Air or something like that, maybe Face Off, or or First Blood or something like that. And this was a tough movie to convince the people running the place to show. And I said, look, okay, look, why don't we start playing it? And if after 10 minutes, if everybody is showing their disgust, and then we can put Con Air back on for like the thousandth time. Nothing against Con Air. It's not a bad movie, but it's kind of ridiculous too. It's ridiculous entertainment. But anyway, I showed the best years of our lives, and starting out there was maybe about 10, 15 people watching, but over the course of the showing, the crowd would get bigger and bigger and bigger. There were gasps. There was definite reactions from everybody watching of what everything was going on screen. When Theresa Wright very infamously later in the movie said that she's going to break Fred Derry's marriage up, they gasped. It's not a joke. They actually gasped. And I was stunned at that. And I think by the time the movie was over, there were over 100 people in that room. And there was not a dry eye in the house. And believe me, these were guys that could kick my ass. They were all sobbing, and I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe it. I mean, Leonard Maltin was right. I mean, that's how powerful this movie is to this very day. I mean, they reacted to this wonderful moment where, they're holding hands and everything while drunk. We've been here many, many, many times before. Yeah, I love that when he finally realizes there's hair on the hand that he's holding. That's wonderful. Hey, Dying Breed, thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for your service, sir. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, my father, my father's father, my grandfather, Stephen, he actually took 5 bullets on D-Day. So I fully understood why my father loved this movie the way he did. I mean, I remember visiting my grandfather at a veterans hospital in 1990, and he hadn't talked about his war experiences in decades, and he still to that moment refused to talk about anything that happened when he was on the beaches of Normandy, which is completely understandable now in retrospect. But what was very depressing about it was that he was basically just lying there, and he all he told me was, I just want to lay here and die. It. But yeah, my father's father actually took 5 bullets on D-Day, and my own father wanted to join the military, but he was denied service because he had flat feet. So he never was able to join. So I thought, you know what, I should join, and I should serve a few years. And I served as a sonar technician. I was on a number of boats, including the USS Fort McHenry out of Japan and the USS Arleigh Burke out of Virginia. However, the highlight of my 8-year Navy service was when I was working in a bunker in Cornwall, England, with the Royal Air Force. And basically what we were doing was listening for submarines in the English Channel and the Atlantic Ocean and the Norwegian seas. And, this was at a time when we still considered Russia friendly, but, oh, yeah, they're friendly, but just keep an eye on them. Just keep an eye on them to make sure they're not doing anything weird or anything. But yeah, I mean, that's basically all the highlights of my military career right there. I mean, sadly, I wasn't able to advance to second-class petty officer. Otherwise, I would have stayed in for 20 years. Unfortunately, after 9/11, there was, of course, a lot of cutting of careers because the military had become overcrowded by that time. So they had no choice but to cut a lot of people. So unfortunately, I reached higher tenure and had to get out. But I will mention that I myself suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. However, not because of combat. As a matter of fact, in my last few years of service, when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, I, to be perfectly honest, I would start questioning why we were doing what we were doing over there, which my superiors did not like. I had sort of become a target of harassment for a number of months. Um, when I was on a 6-month deployment in the Mediterranean Sea, um, unfortunately, I was here again. I was questioning why are we guarding opium fields in the Middle East? You know, that made zero sense to me. And let's just say that I enraged a few people with my speculation, and I was threatened with gang rape in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, there was no place for me to go. I had contemplated suicide by jumping overboard. And so now I suffer from a form of PTSD called military sexual trauma, which, if any of you are interested in learning more about military sexual trauma as a form of PTSD, then I highly recommend you all check out the 2012 documentary called The Invisible War, directed by Kirby Dick, which was nominated for an Oscar, by the way, which showcases that the military has been, in fact, harboring a rape culture for the past 7 decades, ever since World War II. It's a absolutely essential documentary. But the PTSD, as we see in this movie, is, of course, from Frederick's experiences of bombing in B-17 during the war. And this is all very, very accurate. I mean, when you have these nightmares, I mean, they're so realistic and they're so vivid that, and they come very, very frequently, that it literally starts to affect your quality of life and your outlook of life. I mean, because of my personally, because of my traumatic military experiences, I ended up in a very rough period of my life. I actually lived off the grid for several years and didn't really experience much. I mean, I just wanted to get away from society and everything. And I got away from society for a good number of years until I finally decided to try my hand at writing and sell some stuff, which didn't really work out. But I'm no longer living off the grid, and I don't suffer as much as I used to. But believe me, I went through my fair share of suicide attempts and devastating nightmares and depression. And luckily, I didn't get addicted to any medication or anything. But at any rate, because before I lose any more people because of what I'm saying, I might as well just continue talking about the movie here. But we're almost an hour in as Theresa Wright comforts Dana Andrews and lets him sleep in peace. Theresa Wright, I gotta talk about her for a little bit, because after Mrs. Miniver, she of course did this movie, and she also did another movie about veterans who were disabled, called The Men, with Marlon Brando, which came out in 1950. But she actually made a lot more other movies. As a matter of fact, two of my favorite movies with Theresa Wright, aside from Best Years of Our Lives, are actually two of the last films that she did. Because in 1980, she was also in a film that's become a massive cult hit called Somewhere in Time, starring Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour, where she played Jane Seymour's friend in the present, who actually talks to Christopher Reeve before he time travels in his mind back in to 1912 to meet Jane Seymour. And she was actually in semi-retirement at that time. And she's also interviewed on the Universal Blu-ray for Somewhere in Time in the documentary, which I do own a copy of, but it's somewhere behind me, and I'm not going to waste my time looking for it. But the other movie, which her last movie, believe it or not, was for Francis Ford Coppola, who in 1997 had adapted a John Grisham novel called The Rainmaker. And it stars Matt Damon, and it has a massive cast, like with Dan DeVito, uh, John Voight, Claire Danes, Mickey Rourke. I mean, a great cast and a great courtroom thriller. And Theresa Wright plays a woman named Miss Birdie, who Matt Damon befriends. But Miss Birdie wants to make out a will and basically not give anything to her descendants, but to give every dollar that she has made to a televangelist. And Matt Damon is actually trying to figure out how to write up these legal instruments where he's going to give all this old lady's money to this televangelist. Now, that was this is pretty much the last time we're seeing Michael Hall. Like I said, anybody that wants to read any more about him, go to that Apollo magazine article. But like I said, he just passed away last year at the end of 91. But going back to the Rainmaker, so I mean, Theresa Wright played Miss Birdie, and Francis Ford Coppola on his commentary had nothing but glowing words about Theresa Wright. I mean, Francis Ford Coppola said himself that he's a massive fan of Best Years of Our Lives, and he felt honored to be in the presence of Theresa Wright, who really had this minor role in The Rainmaker, but it's still a key role nonetheless. I mean, she's not involved in the central plot of the story, which involves a man dying of cancer, and this insurance company that refuses to support the family in any way. I mean, she's just basically Matt Damon's other case, where he goes back to from time to time. But Theresa Wright probably has like 4 or 5 scenes in The Rainmaker. So here again, another underrated film, which for some reason is not seen nearly enough. I mean, it's my favorite John Grisham adaptation, just to be straight up honest right now, and I've seen it many, many times. But this is a very lovely scene of Dana Andrews waking up, and he has to go back out and find his wife again. But he's having this lovely breakfast with Theresa Wright, who makes him eggs and everything. And we find out Theresa Wright works at a hospital. I was talking over it in the scene before when Michael Hall, when I was talking about Michael Hall during the sequence where Frederic March is talking about the stuff he brought back from Japan and everything. And there's that great moment where Frederic March actually asks his wife, like, so you've taught her everything that she has to know. And we know exactly what he's implying. But, after like a brief moment, or a beat rather, Myrna Loy finally says, she's worked 2 years in a hospital. She knows more than you and I will ever will. And that basically killed the conversation, because, I mean, the thing is, when Frederic March comes home, you got to understand that when he left, they were completely different kids. I mean, they were actually just, kids still in school. And, Theresa Wright has been working in a hospital for 2 years now. And Rob Stevenson, who just left and is not coming back. I mean, he's now in like his senior year of high school. I mean, but when Frederic March left, they were practically still in middle school. They were, completely different people to him. But I was going to mention also about Theresa Wright, a number of other films that she was in. Um, her first film actually was this William Wyler film starring Betty Davis called The Little Foxes. And William Wyler and Betty Davis made a number of movies together in the late 30s and early 40s. The Little Foxes is, I believe, the third and final one that they did. Betty Davis actually was having an affair with William Wyler when they were making their movies, by the way. But yeah, in this film, Theresa Wright plays Betty Davis's daughter, and this is a really good movie that unfortunately has never gotten a Blu-ray. And it's based on a play, and it's about greed and everything. Well worth seeking out. I mean, don't just wait for it on TCM. You know, seriously, go out and check out some of these movies because these are some of the great classics of the era. Little Foxes is a great William Wyler movie with Theresa Wright, but she was also in Pride of the Yankees, where she was nominated for an Oscar next to Gary Cooper, who played the baseball player Lou Gehrig. She was also in Alfred Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt. She was also in other movies like Casanova Brown, Pursued, The Imperfect Lady, California Conquest. One film I really want to see with her in is called The Actress, directed by George Cukor, as well as Track of the Cat, directed by William Wellman. She had done a couple of episodes for Alfred Hitchcock Presents. She had done Bonanza. And then, like I said, I mean, her last few films included Somewhere in Time and The Rainmaker, which I just finished talking about. Yeah. The very first movie she did, she was directed by William Wyler. And the last movie that she did, she was directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And like I said, her character was named Colleen Birdsong, or just Miss Birdie. And this is a wonderful little scene of Frederic March, waking up with a hangover and having to look at a picture of the thing is, Myrna Loy probably chose to put that picture there just to every day while she's getting her hair done and everything, so she could actually see her husband and everything. But this, the first time I saw this at that 1:00 showing when I was 16 years old, oh, I found this so funny. Where okay, he's in the shower, he's doing all right. It's okay, Myrna. He's doing fine. He's in the shower. He's gonna get the day started and everything. And wouldn't you know it, he accidentally went in with his pajamas. Now, I mean, I didn't drink much in the military, so I can't say from personal experience of if I ever got into the shower with a hangover with my clothes on. But look, it works for the film, and it definitely does work for the film. And here we have Dana Andrews and Theresa Wright, of course, getting to know each other a little bit better as they're going off to work here. And one of the things I haven't mentioned about this movie yet is the music score, composed by Hugo Friedhofer. And he was actually recommended to William Wyler and Samuel Goldwyn by Alfred Newman, who had done a number of Hitchcock films, and they wanted him to do the score for this. But he was already the leading composer over at 20th Century Fox. So unfortunately, he wasn't able to do it. But he recommended Hugo Friedhofer, who had only done a few movies before this even happened. And here is the irony, because the music score, there's several themes that play throughout, and they're all beautifully rendered, very, very moving, and they all reflect the characters and what they're going through in so many ways and on so many levels, musically speaking. But I mean, Hugo, he started out in the 1930s with the Dancers, and he had done other films like The Adventures of Marco Polo and Topper Takes a Trip. And his first big movie was actually for 1944's Lifeboat, the Alfred Hitchcock film where the entire movie is set on a boat. And it's probably the most hilarious Hitchcock cameo that he ever did. But Hugo, he won the Oscar for the best years of our lives. After this, he did one of the best boxing movies ever made called Body and Soul with John Garfield. He did The Bishop's Wife. He did another movie with Theresa Wright called Enchantment, which I have to see eventually. He also did Ace in the Hole. He also scored Between Heaven and Hell, The Revolt of Mamie Stover. The Sun Also Rises, based on the Ernest Hemingway book starring Tyrone Power, which is actually really good, even though he was kind of old and miscast, but at any rate. And his last film was actually for a Paul Bartel movie called Private Parts, which is a psychological thriller with black comedy and everything. So yeah, that was the last film he scored in 1972. Now, one film that he also finally did, which I got to confess I'm not a huge fan of, even though it's become like one of the great cult love stories of the past few decades, but he also did An Affair to Remember, which had been originally filmed in 1939 as Love Affair. And the same director decided to go back and make it again in color, but with this time with Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr. And I don't think this movie is as great as a lot of people think. A lot of people think they think it is. I mean, it seems to be a beloved film in the in the community, but it's never worked for me. I mean, the music is really good, but I mean, aside from that, the movie itself has never worked for me. And if I had the choice, I would go back and watch Leo McCarey's Love Affair from 1939 instead. And here we hear the theme for Theresa Wright's character, the music that opens up in the opening credits. That's the Best Years theme. And then there's Cathy O'Donnell, Wilma's theme, which we will hear again later when we see Harold Russell and Cathy O'Donnell again. Yeah, there's this genuine moment of hesitancy about, well, is she actually at this apartment building? I mean, is she really there? And the door, I always like that. And so that will bring up Virginia Mayo is playing Dana Andrews' wife here. Now, Virginia Mayo and Theresa Wright and Dana Andrews were all under contract, along with Cathy O'Donnell. They were all under contract to Samuel Goldwyn at this time. And Virginia Mayo actually was discovered by Samuel Goldwyn when she was on the vaudeville circuit for 3 years. But she served as ringmaster and comedic foil for Pansy the Horse, where she and a partner, Nani Morton, would be performing in this horse suit. And they appeared together in some short films and were a huge hit at Billy Rose's Diamond Horseshoe nightclub when Samuel Goldwyn discovered Virginia Mayo and everything. And she had done a 1944 movie for Goldwyn and starring Bob Hope called The Princess and the Pirate, which admittedly I have to see that as well. And then she did a string of successful musical comedies with Danny Kaye, like the Kid from Brooklyn, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which is more well known now because of the fact that Ben Stiller recently did a remake of the movie. Now, I have to rewatch Secret Life of Walter Mitty for obviously the book that I'm working on, and I'm not looking forward to it because while Danny Kaye was a highly talented performer, like in films like The Court Jester. I found Secret Life of Walter Mitty just very tough to sit through. I mean, it is produced by Samuel Goldwyn, and Virginia Mayo just does the same thing that basically in the remake. Okay, I'm trying to think of her name that wrote Bridesmaids, and it's not coming right now. But in the 2011 remake, Kristen Wiig played Virginia Mayo's character, and basically in both films, I mean, they're just the exact same character in that all they do is react to Mitty when he's in his dream state, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, to be honest. But I mean, Virginia Mayo, she was also in White Heat, which is another genuine classic with James Cagney. And I mean, she was definitely a beautiful woman. And to be honest, she named her book "The Best Years of My Life," and I think that she earned that only because of the fact that she actually does say that in the movie. She actually alludes to the title in the movie, which originally this was based on made into a book called Glory for Me by McKinley Cancer. Nobody liked the title for Glory for Me, so they decided, well, we need a more appropriate title for this. And ultimately it came about only a week before when they had the final script prepared, which I have a copy of, that they chose Best Years of Our Lives. And it's a very quizzical title, because you think, well, wait a minute, is it a ironic title? I mean, are they talking about the years that they were together before the war, the years they were together after the war? It's kind of it's not really clear as to what exactly the title is referring to, but that's another reason why I love the title so much. It's ambivalence, it's mystery. We don't know exactly when these years are that the title is referring to. I mean, we can assume that it's what we're watching right now, but what we're watching right now is not all that much fun, as these veterans are trying to get back into civilian life with smoothness. And Frederic March, he just got a call from his boss, who runs the bank that he works at. And I love the line that he says about, last year was killing Japs, but this year making money. And I think on that note, I should also mention that Best Years of Our Lives not only was the very first BAFTA winner for Best Picture, it played for 55 weeks in one theater alone, where servicemen would come in droves and see the movie and would come out in tears, essentially. But it also won in many other countries around the world, including Japan, of all places. And it's interesting to note that when Robert E. Sherwood agreed to write the script, that this was only a few days. He signed on for this only a few days after we had bombed Japan. And and so when his script was officially ready on April 9th, and they shot for several months, and in November this movie opened in New York, but when it opened in Japan, it actually won Best Picture of the Year in Japan. That, I think, speaks volumes as to how much of an impact the movie had all over the world. Because I said it before, it's not just honoring American veterans, it's honoring veterans everywhere. They don't have to be American. And look, I challenge anybody and everybody out there to come to me with another movie that essentially healed the world like Best Years of Our Lives did. I'm challenging anybody right now. Name another movie that healed the entire world like this movie did. You're very welcome. Yes. Thank you for your service, Stone, and sharing your story. I'm glad I finally shared my story. Yes. But I mean, one of the things that I need to talk about also is the fact that this actor right here, his name is Chamberlain. That's his name. He plays the head of this drugstore. He and also the actor that plays Dana Andrews' father, Rudy Bomer, I believe his name is. They were both cited as having ties to communism, because what had happened is that along with several other films, The Best Years of Our Lives was cited in a report to the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the late 1940s, right before the communist witch hunts. And this actor, along with the actor that played Dana Andrews' father, were unfortunately both blacklisted. A very sad reflection and reality of what was going on at that time. But it's also interesting to note that the film was also re-released by RKO during the Korean War, so that the Korean War veterans saw everything that they were experiencing when they got home as well. There have been many movies since Best Years of Our Lives that have focused on veterans struggling to return home and PTSD in particular. One of the first that comes to mind is, of course, Born on the 4th of July with Tom Cruise, which is about a real-life Vietnam veteran who came home paralyzed from mid-chest down, and he had to accept had to accept the fact that the Vietnam War was purely not for any real noble cause, but rather just to make the government money. And I've always believed, even though the conspiracy allegations are numerous, but I've personally always believed that John F. Kennedy was murdered by high-ranking government officials who just wanted to make money from Vietnam. I think that's all it was. I think it was all about money, and his refusal to actually go to Vietnam led to his assassination, and eventually LBJ, sent everybody to Vietnam. Literally, the day that he took office, the day that he actually did his speech and everything, the day that he took the oath, the very first meeting he called was over Vietnam. Pretty much. Now, we find out in this scene that Frederic March is, of course, going to be promoted. Ironically, while Fred Derry is out there looking for work and he's barely considering the drugstore that he used to work at, Frederic March is going to be going up in the world and making $12,000 a year. Now, and he's going to be in charge of small loans. Now, I decided to rewatch this documentary from 2010 called Inside Job, directed by Charles Ferguson, which actually it actually won the Oscar that year for Best Documentary. And it's basically about the 2008 financial crisis, which cost tens of millions of people their jobs and homes and their savings all around the world, thanks to a bubble in the housing markets and the financial sectors. And basically, all the banks on Wall Street got away with stealing people's life savings and their homes, all with no consequences whatsoever. And it's a devastating movie. It's a very infuriating movie, but it also showcased just how times have changed from the 1940s, where back at this time, the heads of the banks didn't want to bet the farm. It came to playing around with depositors' money. They wanted to live well, but they didn't want to bet the farm. They didn't go overboard with how they were going to handle depositors' money and everything. But unfortunately, with the Glass-Steagall being replaced by the Graham-Leach Bliley Act, which some people called the Citigroup Relief Act, in the early 2000s, it just started a massive bubble I mean, actually, ever since the 80s when Ronald Reagan gave all the power to the banks. And we had a number of crises at that time, notably Charles Keaton and the Lincoln Savings and Loan scandal. And I'm still talking about banking when I should be enjoying Virginia Mayo making a phone call here. I mean, Virginia Mayo, even though this was totally against her um, own type, what she would normally play in the movies, I mean, she's terrific here. I mean, she impressed so many people. In fact, John Huston actually gave her a call and said, "Oh my God, you were so good. Why you were not nominated is beyond me." But yeah, I mean, a lot of people were very, very impressed with Virginia Mayo's work, even though she wasn't really taken seriously by critics at this time. Like I said, I mean, this and White Heat appears to be her most famous movies. And I mean, of course, I got to catch up on her filmography eventually. I mean, Princess and the Pirate, obviously, The Kid from Brooklyn, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, White Heat, starring James Cagney. I mean, she has an interesting resume. It's just not nearly as impressive as Frederic March and Myrna Loy and Dana Andrews, but she still did her fair share of good films, especially in the 40s and 50s. But I mean, this marriage dynamic is very important to consider because she just wants him to wear that uniform. She just wants to show him off at parties and nightclubs, and not even consider the economic situation that they're in, and try to be a little bit more careful with the money they spend because she's too addicted to that way of life. And sadly, I mean, their marriage is going to pay for it for that reason. You mean there's a black market? I mean, but see, by the mid 1950s, Virginia Mayo was making movies like King Richard and the Crusaders and Pearl of the South Pacific. They weren't really the same thing as the high class ritzy movies that she was making with Danny Kaye and for Samuel Goldwyn at that time. But I love her in this movie, and looking forward to watching more of her work in preparation for the book I'm writing. So, but she's one of the few people I haven't really dived into their filmography yet. Everything on the military uniforms are 100% authentic. All the medals and ribbons and everything. I mean, these were all real, genuine uniforms. And Dana Andrews, even though he was the only one of the three veterans to never actually serve, he had already done several military roles in the 1940s during the war. So that, I mean, watching him on screen as a veteran was relatively easy. I mean, the audience accepted him immediately in this role. But at any rate, we're finally going back to Cathy O'Donnell, who's going to be going to see Homer as he's out in the shed, keeping to himself and shooting his gun. Now, Cathy O'Donnell is a very interesting case because she had only done 17 movies over the course of her career. Her first movie was Wonder Man, where she was a nightclub extra, uncredited. But after that, she would do a number of films, mostly film noirs, such as Bury Me Dead and The Amazing Mr. X. But probably the most famous of all of them, which was released by Criterion only a couple years ago, was Nicholas Ray's They Live by Night, which is based on the same source material as Robert Altman's Thieves Like Us, about these crooks and the Depression. And she is really striking in that movie. She was also in a 1950 movie called Side Street, which unfortunately is out of print. What happened was at Warner Brothers, they released They Live by Night and Side Street as part of a noir double feature DVD, which I had to order a out of print copy of. But they both have commentaries on that DVD, is the reason why I wanted both of them so badly. But if you love They Live by Night, pick up the Criterion, absolutely. But and she only did a few other films after that. But notably, one other film that she did do, which is kind of a weird connection to William Wyler, is she was actually in the sequel to Mrs. Miniver called The Miniver Story, where Greer Garson and Walter Pidgeon redid their roles. This was a MGM movie from 1950 that they made as a sequel to, of course, the original Mrs. Miniver. But this was not directed by William Wyler. This was directed by H.C. Potter. And Cathy O'Donnell's role is very interesting in that she essentially took over the role from Theresa Wright from the first film. I mean, it's not the same character, but it's practically the same role, because she goes through some things that are similar to what Theresa Wright did in Mrs. Miniver. So it's really weird seeing her in the sequel to Mrs. Miniver, but it's actually not bad. If you ever decide to check this out, I mean, I think that those who would love Mrs. Miniver will get more out of this, obviously, than an average viewer. But it's still definitely worth picking up. Still definitely worth picking up and checking out if you're a fan of classic film and love Mrs. Miniver. Now, this is a very, very moving moment where Harold Russell, he's just under the impression or under the delusion, as you could say, that he will just not be accepted because of his hooks. And of course, he's stared at by the local kids, including this girl that he lives with, Luella. And see, we hadn't really seen any movies with disabled characters since 1932's Freaks, directed by Todd Browning, which was about circus sideshow performers. And so the whole idea of casting him in this role was very, very brave. I mean, it was something that just directors weren't doing. But Samuel Goldwyn and William Wyler, they wanted that ultra realism. They felt like if they didn't have, there's a great story about Samuel Goldwyn actually sent Harold Russell to attend acting classes, and William Wyler just yanked him out and went back to Goldwyn and said, "Like, are you crazy? No. We're gonna everything that is reflecting Harold Russell's life is in this character Homer Parrish. We need a performance that's natural." And that's the thing, is that because he was so earnest and so empathetic in this role is the reason why audiences fell in love with him so much. Sadly, though, he only made 2 other movies in his career. In 1980, Richard Donner had just finished Superman, and so he directed this small, intimate film called Inside Moves about disabled people, and Harold Russell was in that as well, in a very memorable role. And he also did a movie from 1997, which the name escapes me off the top of my head, but unfortunately I've never seen it. I've seen Inside Moves. That just came out on Blu-ray, as a matter of fact, courtesy of Kino Lorber. But I've never seen the other film that he did. It's very hard to come by. I think I tried looking for it several years ago, and I just wasn't able to find it anywhere. Oh, it's called Dogtown. Yeah, it's a American drama film by George Hickenlooper and set in the town of Cuba, Missouri. And it stars Mary Stuart Masterson, John Favreau, Rory Cochrane, and Natasha Gregson Wagner. So I've never seen that film. So if anybody can find out where I can get a hold of that, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, okay, this scene right here, we're about to see what is supposed to happen when Harold Russell, when his father is taking off his clothes and getting him ready for bed. But we go to a close up of Harold Russell rather than see actually what's going on, because we're going to be seeing all that later with the famous scene that Harold Russell does with Cathy O'Donnell as he's being put to bed here. But this has become like a routine for him where, he only trusts his father at the moment to do this ritual every single night. Puts the cigarette in the ashtray and going to bed. And of course, as you can see, the father leaves the door open an inch so that he would be able to get out and go to the bathroom or wherever he needs to go in the middle of the night. And Virginia Mayo just looks absolutely ravishing in this scene, but of course, we're going to start disliking her character very, 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 very soon. She's going to get more annoying as the film goes forward as a character, especially at this point when they have no more money and now they're being forced to eat cheap groceries that he's going to be cooking for both of them, like what, liverwurst and potato salad. It's not exactly the usual nightclub cuisine. Hey, Jamie, thank you so much for coming on board. I can't stay, but I wanted to leave you a like. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, anybody who leaves me a like and anybody who's in the chat, thank you so much for coming. Even if it's only for a brief amount of time, it means so much to me. It really does. Let me do a timestamp actually real quick. We are at approximately an hour and 32 minutes and 35 seconds. So anybody that wants to jump in at this time, just go ahead and jump to the 1 hour and 33 minute mark. And yeah, we have just about an hour and 18 minutes left to go. So I haven't run out of things to say yet. Trust me. I mean, I've already said plenty already, but I haven't run out of things to say just yet. Now, see, I mean, the difference between Virginia Mayo and Theresa Wright is very much evident in this scene where, she's just not giving her husband the compassion and the comfort that he deserves after going through so many traumatic experiences. Like, I mean, her thing is just, oh, you just got to snap out of it. It'll be all right. No. He can't just snap out of it. She's such a floozy that she refuses to even understand what he's going through. She has no clue. She doesn't see it at all. It's very, very dismissive and very disrespectful, obviously. I mean, probably the most sympathetic thing that she's done this whole movie was, asking, in certain pictures that he showed her, like, what were those things up in the air when you were bombing and everything? At least she was slightly interested in what he actually did. But aside from that, she is completely, just completely dismissive of everything that he's going through, which of course is going to end up being, making this marriage very, very sour and unloving and ultimately unsuccessful. So as we can see, Dana Andrews, uh, before Dana Andrews came to Hollywood, of course, Dana Andrews actually worked as a soda jerk. So, it's really interesting. Frederic March was a banker before he became an actor. Dana Andrews was a soda jerk before he became an actor. So, I mean, all these roles I think are so perfect in their casting that it transcends. It really does. $1.98 for the large jar. So yeah, he's going to be selling women's fragrances, and eventually, you know, um, work making more sandwiches and ice cream sodas for like the high school girls coming in. By the way, we saw a shot earlier of him uh, leaving the drugstore, and there were a couple girls giggling at the table. Those were William Wyler's actual daughters. That was doing a little flirtatious giggling there. I see you're in the Navy in the Seabees. Yep. Excuse me while I take some water real quick. And this guy actually said he was at Iwo Jima, and he's got a wife and four children. And now, of course, he wants to get a loan at the bank. But of course, we run into a problem because we find out that he has no collateral. He has no financial backing to repay the loan, at least not right now. But Frederick March, of course, being in the army and recognizing that here's a man that is full of drive and persistence that actually worked on a farm while he was growing up. He knows that he's a very, very safe risk. He's on the fence about it right now. And of course, it's after he meets Homer, who comes in into the bank. Now, Wyler was known as a very difficult director to work with. I mean, like I said before, even though he and Betty Davis had an affair during the films that they made, um, he was notorious because a lot of shots in this movie are, believe it or not, one takes. Very, very few times. He knew exactly what he wanted from his actors. The actors were comfortable. They knew exactly what he wanted, and that's why everything was so copacetic during shooting. It just everything seemed to click together. Every scene, everything seemed to click with this movie. But with this particular sequence, he probably shot more takes than any other scene in the movie. In this scene alone, he did about 30 takes with um, Harold Russell and Frederick March. But I was going to say real quick, two other films that he did with Betty Davis. I showed you the Little Foxes earlier. He also did Jezebel from 1938, which a lot of people have actually remarked as being a Gone with the Wind precursor, even though it's very, very different than that. This is a great movie as well, and not just for the fact that actually that the climactic third act takes place during a pandemic. So this was actually a great movie to pick up during the Warner Archive sale for that. But I also got The Letter, which this was the last film that oh, I'm sorry, not the last film we did together, but this is a film they did at Warner Brothers with Betty Davis. Yeah, based on the W. Somerset Maugham novel. But another great William Wyler film, which is actually also one of the best of the 30s, also produced by Samuel Goldwyn, is of course Dodsworth, based on the novel by Sinclair Lewis, which a very successful couple. The husband retires after many years, and they decide to go on a European honeymoon, but they both end up having affairs. Very, very, very mature film for the 1930s, and yeah, and it's one of William Wyler's best, without a doubt. But finally, I wanted to also showcase some other films that he did with producer Samuel Goldwyn, which are also high in my list. These three, which also came out in 1936 with Miriam Hopkins and Merle Oberon, set in a school where this lie goes out of control. The girl that said the lie, it results in destroying the three people that actually helped build the school. Another great classic from the 30s. The 1939 adaptation of Wuthering Heights was in fact directed by William Wyler and produced by Samuel Goldwyn, starring Laurence Olivier and Miriam Hopkins. Probably, arguably, the best adaptation of the Bronte book Wuthering Heights, without a doubt. And finally, another one I picked up was Come and Get It. Now, this one is a bit, Howard Hawks started filming this movie, and William Wyler actually took over. So, and Wyler never really considered this one of his films, to be perfectly honest. It's actually more of a Hawks movie than a Wyler movie. But I wanted to throw those out there also, just to let people know that they exist and they're out there, especially on physical media. And another film that William Wyler did in 1949, which is considered just as great, is the Heiress with Olivia de Havilland, which just got a Criterion Collection release, which I haven't gotten yet, unfortunately. And he's also responsible for Roman Holiday with Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn, which I consider one of the great romantic comedies of all time, period. I mean, that ending, when I saw it for the first time, that ending to Roman Holiday just blew me away. No joke. And finally, last but not least, the other film that he won the Academy Award for directing for, aside from Mrs. Miniver and Best Years of Our Lives, is actually Ben-Hur, which was actually the most honored movie at the time with 11 Oscars. And I can't help but think that with Ben-Hur, that he lost some of his critical clout or some of the serious criticism from historians. Because, I mean, look, Ben-Hur, as spectacular as it is, I don't consider it history, because I don't consider the Bible genuine history. But it's still a massive spectacle, and the the chariot races are still incredible to this day and age. But if I was going to watch any of the other Wyler movies I just showed you on physical media, I would watch any of those over Ben-Hur. Although I gotta say, Ben-Hur also served as the final film for Cathy O'Donnell. What had happened was that Cathy O'Donnell had actually married William Wyler's brother, Robert Wyler, who was much older than her. And even though she had done some noirs and she had done some other things, and aside from They Live by Night, Cathy O'Donnell's other real big movie was, of course, Ben-Hur. And it turned out to be her cinematic swan song after 17 movies. But I should also mention about Robert E. Sherwood, in that he was also disabled from World War II, and that he was the speechwriter for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he had one of his best films from 1940, I think, is his movie about Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, Abe Lincoln in Illinois, which won the Pulitzer Prize for drama. And Robert E. Sherwood won 4 Pulitzer Prizes, by the way. He was, he was considered one of the great actors, one of the great screenwriters of the time. And sadly, he passed away in 1955, only 9 years after after this came out. I remember I read in Myrna Loy's book that she actually ran into him while on holiday when she was um, protesting her roles at the studio, particularly after going through a miscarriage. Sadly, Myrna Loy was going through all that, and she had met Robert E. Sherwood overseas while she was recuperating and uh, uh, being bad from the studio, essentially. And she was doing exactly what Olivia de Havilland would be doing in the 1940s, which is basically telling MGM, "Hey, look, you know, we're being treated like factory workers. You need to give us a little bit more. You have to give us some time off. You know, you can't just throw us in one film after the other." And she sort of changed all that for actors in Hollywood, which is extraordinary. Here again, another question why, I mean, Myrna Loy never got an Oscar. It's just unbelievable. Now, see, this is a great scene where he stands up to the head of the bank about giving out this small loan to Novak, even though he doesn't have any collateral. But because of his background and because of his experience of actually working on the farm, Frederic March knows he will pay it back. He just knows that, you know, everything will be coming back to him. But I was mentioning earlier about the movie Inside Job that I was watching, in that, you know, for 40 years after World War II, there was all this regulation. And that all changed in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan gave all the power to the banks. And then we had 40 years of deregulation. And that, of course, climaxed in the 2008 financial crisis, where millions lost their homes and their life savings. Yeah, check out Inside Job. It's got very lucid narration by Matt Damon, of all people, who, of course, starred in The Rainmaker, which I talked about before, which was Theresa Wright's last movie. But yeah, Inside Job is a very, very important film. I mean, considering the fact that the laws that are still in place to protect these criminals on Wall Street, it's just really sad how much the banking industry has gone to shit. I mean, they say too big to fail. Well, they're actually just too big to jail. Yeah, Virginia Mayo isn't that great of a housewife, is she? It's like, of course, this was made at a time when all the women were being pushed back into the kitchen after years of working. There's this documentary out there called "The Life and Time of Rosie the Riveter," which showcases all this about, you know, how women were, you know, they were put to work while the men were off fighting, and then when the men came back, they were basically ordered back into the kitchen. Um, One of the reasons why I think the show I Love Lucy, which I had also mentioned before because of Tennessee Ernie Ford, one of the reasons why that show was such a massive success was because of the fact that Lucy was so determined to do something outside the kitchen, that she actually wanted to get on her husband Ricky Ricardo's show in New York City. Women love that. They really got behind the whole idea of women having careers outside of the kitchen. And it wasn't really until Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique in 1962 that it started to turn the tide on women going back to work and actually having successful careers. But William Wyler, you know, was known, of course, for his feminist leanings. And that's part of the reason why Myrna Loy, Cathy O'Donnell, Virginia Mayo, and Theresa Wright are all very, very strong, very, very well written and crafted characters. And they're given so much attention that I think normal directors wouldn't have done. Maybe George Cukor, because George Cukor loved working with actresses as well. In fact, he even directed 1939's The Women, which is about the satire of how women are Myrna Loy. I mean, these asides and everything that she says with these looks, they say so much. Her instincts are pretty good. Yeah, yeah. He knows that. And of course, we're gonna have a long night of alcohol and of more shenanigans with the bottle. But of course, the real heart of this conversation, which is going to be paid off later, is the fact that they now think that Theresa Wright is in love with Fred, which of course is in fact the case. They saw each other for lunch. They had that kiss, which it's a pretty powerful kiss. It's a pretty sexy kiss as well. It was actually the very last shot of the movie that William Wyler was responsible for. Yeah, Roman Holiday is definitely one of William Wyler's um, most beloved movies, and certainly my favorite Audrey Hepburn movie by far. Yeah, he better finish his drink and get out of there. it's, Now, I remember when I showed this movie to those veterans that I was talking about before in Great Lakes after I graduated from basic training. And their response to this scene in particular, when, not this scene, but the scene afterward that's coming up with all the Mr. Milton and all the rest of the bankers and their families and everything, welcoming Frederic March home. I mean, I look at a scene like this now and I just think to myself, what, like, where did we go wrong? Where did America fall off the train of of this? It's particularly appropriate that valiantly fought for that freedom. Yes. Because I mean the thing is that look, we lied in going to Vietnam. We lied into going to Afghanistan. And it just seems like that, war is now a business where soldiers and sailors alike were all expendable. And I always love what George Carlin said, that conservatives want live babies to grow up to be dead soldiers. And unfortunately, I think that's the case. I mean, the fact that we are going to war just to make contractors money is rather despicable. I mean, it almost doesn't matter what the excuse is. The point is that we're lying to go to war, and that the government and these contractors are making money off of us going to these wars, and it's just not going to stop. I don't see the American government stopping for any reason. I mean, after this 20-year battle in Iraq and Afghanistan, of course, all the warmongers got on public news and started saying, "Oh my God, we did a big mistake. We made a big mistake that Biden shouldn't have pulled out and everything." And uh, look, I can't help but just wonder. We had all these 40 years of economic growth up until the 80s. What if it had just continued going down that path? How glorious would it have been that if we had adopted Franklin Delano Roosevelt's second Bill of Rights, which guaranteed everybody to a job and a vacation and all that stuff. I always wonder what it would have been like, because this scene, as inspiring and funny as it is, it I really wish it rang more true than it actually did in 46. The little story about taking the hill, exactly. But I mean, like I said, after all these years of financial deregulation, and I mean, the banks now practically own the government, and that is a very, very, very scary thing. There are some who say that the old bank is suffering from hardening of the arteries and of the heart, but I refuse to listen to such radical talk. The bank is alive, but it's not really human. Let's put it that way. But still, the idea behind this is wonderful. If only if only it was the reality of today, which unfortunately is sadly not. Uh, banks just want to gamble with with the depositors' money on derivatives, and they're not going to stop. It's going to be unregulated for however long it takes until we have another collapse. So I'm sorry, I had to get a little real worldish there for a minute, but I can't help it. Just to give another time stamp to everybody out there, let everybody know where we are. We are at 1 hour and 56 minutes and 30 seconds. So we have just under an hour left. Yeah, I think going by the clock, we have about 54 minutes left here as we get into the third hour of this movie. Now, when this movie got a sneak preview in October of 1946, the editor, by the way, Daniel Mandel, also was among the winners at the Oscars, and the running time of the movie was 170 minutes when it played in that sneak preview, and they wanted to gauge from the audience how much of it to cut, because they obviously all felt it was too long. But when the movie concluded, the sneak preview audience was so moved, and they were so taken aback by what they had just watched, especially since they were actually living it at that time. They told the filmmakers, do not cut 1 second. Do not cut 1 second out of the movie. And as a result, on November 21st, 1946, the movie had its grand premiere in New York. And immediately, it got nothing but praise from the critics. It was, and also the audiences loved it. I mean, they went to the theaters in droves to see this movie when it came out in 1946. It was the #1 box office hit of all time ever since Gone with the Wind. And Gone with the Wind, of course, was based on the Margaret Mitchell novel, which was the #1 book for 3 years in a row. So, of course, that film had such the impact that it did. This was different, though. This was actually showcasing what was going on at the present time, as opposed to having this, romanticized view of the old South, which, unfortunately, because of cancel culture, a lot of people would want to see Gone with the Wind go away. I don't think it's. I don't think it's that disturbing with the with its use of race and how the slaves are shown and everything. I mean, like I said, I think it's just as progressive as it is regressive when showcasing all that. But that's a conversation for another movie, for another commentary. But the point is that this movie was such a massive hit when it came out, and it overseas it played to packed houses. I mean, like I said, in England when it played for 55 weeks in one theater and eventually won the BAFTA for Best Picture. I mean, it had that much of an impact. I mean, and like I said, it didn't feel Hollywood. This movie did not feel all that much like Hollywood. Ironically, Mrs. Miniver was criticized as being too much like Hollywood in terms of its depiction of middle class life in England during the war years. So, I mean, whatever criticisms that Mrs. Miniver had for being propaganda and that it was a that it was a Hollywoodized showcasing of that period, Best Years got none of those criticisms. Like I said, all it got was praise, pretty much from everyone. It was pretty much unanimous. And when the film finally made it to the Academy Awards in 1946, hold on a minute. Let me just bring it up real quick. The films that it was up against for Best Picture, just real quick, were Laurence Olivier's Henry V from United Artists, Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life from RKO, which was also the same distributor as Best Years, Razor's Edge, which was Daryl F. Zanuck's adaptation of that book for 20th Century Fox, and finally MGM's adaptation of The Yearling, which won Claude Jarman Jr. a special Oscar for his juvenile performance. Interestingly enough, William Wyler and Frank Capra had joined forces to make Liberty Films right before the Best Years of Our Lives. And of course, Liberty Films released It's a Wonderful Life. And It's a Wonderful Life, unfortunately, had the exact opposite performance at the box office than Best Years did. It's a Wonderful Life was a flop. It was a pretty costly flop at that. And it didn't get the attention and recognition until decades later when it was shown on television so many times. It had gotten so much attention that it's now known virtually by everybody today, but yet nobody really remembers Best Years of Our Lives or talks about Best Years of Our Lives, when It's a Wonderful Life is the one that seems to be the one that's always talked about and shown over the Christmas holidays. Now, like I said, when Theresa Wright actually said that she's going to break that marriage up, right in this scene, that entire room of servicemen just gasped. They could not believe that a movie from 1946 actually had a woman say this line. It was that shocking. It was that shocking to them. And of course, you know, it also showcases their approval in that they were rooting for Theresa Wright to actually pull this off. I mean, the audience sees it. I mean, she obviously sees it, but you know, how are you going to convince your own parents that you're going to break this marriage up and be successful? But, you know, she's fallen in love with Dana Andrews, which is completely understandable, especially when he gets absolutely no love at all from his own wife. So, yeah, she actually confesses to him what happened in the parking lot. They had lunch together, and he kissed me and everything. And you know, Frederic March isn't really buying that, even though he befriended Fred and everything, he's not really buying the fact that his intentions are 100% sincere or everything. Whereas you're possessed with all the wisdom of the ages, you can see into his secret recesses of his innermost soul. Yeah, this Robert Sherwood dialogue is just magnificent. And this was all written word for word in the script. There was very few changes from Robert E. Sherwood's script to this movie. I mean, very, very few changes. There were a couple scenes that were shot that never materialized into the movie. There's one thing I was going to bring up later when we come to the scene. When we come to the particular scene, they actually took out a line of dialogue that Sherwood was very adamant about keeping in the final cut, and it just didn't make it. But yeah, this scene right here is one of the famous heart-wrenching scenes where Theresa Wright, tells them all this, and they have and Myrna Loy says, we've never had any trouble. How many times have I told you I hated you and believed in my heart? And that is all word from the script. Like I said, I mean, there's very little difference between what Robert Sherwood wrote in the script that ended up on screen. It's all in there. It's all intact. And this is a very haunting moment when Frederic March actually leaves the room so that the women can comfort each other. And he has a cigarette in the shadows. Obviously he's up to something, that he's going to confront Fred about this. And, we're hoping beyond hope that it's not going to get physical. We're really hoping. This is at least all I was feeling when I first saw the movie when I was a teenager. I mean, I think you could interpret what he's thinking in so many different ways, or in this particular scene. But yeah, the next morning he decides to go to Butch's and asks Fred to come meet him there. And going back to the deep focus photography of courtesy of Greg Toland, this particular scene has one of the most famous and striking examples of it, where we see Dana Andrews go into the back of the bar and get into a phone booth. And as we will see here in just a few minutes, when Frederic March goes over to the piano to see this piano lesson that Hoagy Carmichael was given Harold Russell, he looks over and he sees Fred in the phone book in the very, very back. And as an audience, we see exactly what his reaction is in equal focus of Frederic March. So we're coming up to it. Well, I'll show you when it gets there. But like I said, this is a very tense scene. I mean, it's as simple as just two men in a bar, looking at each other and having a conversation. But this scene is so intense. And, even when I was showing this to all those servicemen in Great Lakes, you could feel the tension in the air. It's like, oh no, is this going to resort to blows or something like that? I mean, because this is, this is really, this is really on the edge stuff, especially for these characters who, genuinely like each other. But at the same time, they now have this conflict to deal with, where Fred's married but he seems to be in love with Peggy, and Peggy is in love with him, and vice versa. And Frederic March is just not having it. He's not having it at all. I've learned a lot of tricks on fighting dirty. If I get tangled up with you, I might forget about everything and break your neck. Yeah. Taking her love on a bootleg basis. Yeah, that's that's very much from the writer of the Depression era. Absolutely. And as you can see, the look on Fred's face is just like, oh, yeah. Okay, end it right now. That's it. And of course, as audience members, we're heartbroken. We don't want to see this relationship be fizzled. We don't want it to be destroyed. But Frederic March, as a father, is not hearing any of it at the moment. We are at 2 hours and 9 minutes and 15 seconds. For anybody that wants to join in at this point, We got approximately 40 minutes left. So we're getting there. We're getting there. I know this is a long movie, but the thing is it never feels 3 hours long. This is one of those movies that goes by in such a heartbeat, at least to me, that I never think about the running time when it comes to this movie. I mean, I'm only thinking about the running time when I have to get timestamps for a live commentary. So there you go. Let's show Al our new routine. Got something to show you. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And he apparently learned chopsticks from Hoagy Carmichael here. Yeah, Harold Russell. I mean, it's very true. He did so many things with those hooks. It's unbelievable. How much of a I mean, he served. He worked with the Veteran Affairs for many decades after this movie, and eventually he actually sold one of his Oscars to pay for his wife's medical bills, which some people were not happy about it, but he's absolutely right. And why keep it for sentimental reasons when I can use it to help the woman I love? So there you go. That's he was a hero until the end. He was a massive, massive hero until the end. But I'm still surprised it's actually directed by Richard Donner. So much that I'm surprised that Theresa Wright was directed by Francis Ford Coppola of all people. As you can see, there's now this tension between the men. It's like, wait a minute. Harold Russell knows something's up. He knows something's up. Knows something happened. I mean, Fred just left without saying a word, and we see the devastation of the result of this. Yeah, all these scenes with the women, are so, so good. He said he's sorry for what happened. Just one of those things. And now you can relax because that's the end of my career as a homewrecker. It's devastating, but it's kind of funny at the same time. Just here again, Sherwood's dialogue is just peerless. It's peerless and it's brilliant, and it really, really illuminates everything that was going on in 1946. But yeah, going back to the movies that was nominated up against in 1946 at the Oscars, Frederic March won Best Actor over Laurence Olivier, Larry Parks, Gregory Peck, and James Stewart for It's a Wonderful Life. Olivia Havilland won over Celia Johnson for Brief Encounter, Jennifer Jones for Duel in the Sun, Rosalind Russell for Sister Kenny, and Jane Wyman for The Yearling. So as you can see, Myrna Loy wasn't even nominated, which is kind of a mystery. I mean, I understand Olivia de Havilland winning. In fact, I'm overjoyed that she won. But why wasn't Myrna Loy nominated? It's just beyond me. And finally, William Wyler won Best Director over David Lean for Brief Encounter. Here again, a British classic that, I mean, he won over Frank Capra, who he formed Liberty Films with, so Capra could make It's a Wonderful Life. And he also won over Robert Sidniak for The Killers and Clarence Brown for The Yearling. Some other big films that was nominated that year were Anna and the King of Siam, Saratoga Trunk, Duel in the Sun, The Jolson Story, Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious, Claude Rains was nominated for that. But, it's really funny that in terms of 1946 films, in terms of my own personal ranking, Best Years, of course, is number one, and It's a Wonderful Life is number three. Well, number two would happen to be Howard Hawks's The Big Sleep, which stars Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, which is one of the great film noirs of that period. But at any rate, we have the scene of him, Harold Russell, meeting a board in the drugstore that Fred is working at, and he turns out to be one of those that was against the war and actually criticized Washington for bringing us into war. And you can notice that his sympathies weren't with the American soldiers, as he says right here when he corrects Harold Russell about you got plenty of guts to see what a guy had to sacrifice yourself and for what. It's like, what are you talking about? Harold Russell says the Japs and the Nazis, but the board actually says no. The Germans and the Japs didn't have anything against us. They just wanted to fight the Limeys and the Reds, and we would have whipped them too. Well, in Robert E. Sherwood's original script, he actually refers to those in Washington as Jew lovers. Now, it didn't make it into the final film, as you can see, but Robert E. Sherwood fought that. He really wanted to really get it out in the open and just just say it as it was. But look, politics aside, and I know that I've had my moments during this commentary where I brought up politics and everything just to illuminate the differences between now and then. The fact when Harold Russell actually approaches him and says that we should have been, that we were all a bunch of suckers, the ship, the ship that he saw, go down with over 400 of his shipmates, calling them suckers. It really makes me think of Donald Trump referring to all the veterans as suckers when he was being forced out of his busy schedule to go to funerals and memorials for service members. Apparently he just lived in so much of a bubble in New York City with his rich family that he just doesn't understand the sacrifices that servicemen made then as well as now. Okay, it's just a fact. So whenever I hear Harold Russell talk about suckers, it will always make me think of Donald Trump and all the bullshit that he said attacking veterans last year, which is just uncalled for and disgusting. So I guess what I'm saying is this guy probably would have voted for Trump. He probably would have voted for him. But I love this moment where he picks up the American flag pin that he was wearing on his lapel. And don't worry, I'm not going to bring up politics anymore during this commentary. I think I've said enough as far as that is concerned. I mean, let's just enjoy the rest of this. We're at 2 hours and 18 minutes, timestamp 2 hours and 18 minutes. So we have approximately 32 minutes left to go in the best years of our lives as we're about to finally enter the third act here, where Dan Andrews gives Harold Russell this inspiring lecture and how he needs to just go to Wilma and just get married. Get married as soon as possible. Don't let her go. Whatever you do, don't let her go. Because we as an audience can clearly see that Cathy O'Donnell loves him and that she wants to take care of him, and he needs to realize that before it's too late. And that sets up for one of the most heartbreaking and wonderfully powerful moments in American cinema, where he goes home and Wilma is going to be the one putting him to bed instead of his own father. And like I said, Harold Russell practically lived through all this. This was a perfect reflection of his life. Homer Paris is Harold Russell in so many ways. I also am lucky enough to own a rare copy of his book from 1948 called Victory in My Hands. I mean, he did release another book after this called The Best Years of My Life, but his book from 1948 called Victory in My Hands is the one that really details all the experiences he had with making Best Years. And funny, even though that Samuel Goldwyn was criticized for essentially because he only paid Harold Russell, he only paid him about $7,000 as opposed to like the $100,000 salaries of Myrna Loy. Goldwyn was accused of exploiting him on the screen. But the truth of the matter is that when this movie came out and it was a massive success at the Oscars and everything, Harold Russell won both of his Oscars. Samuel Goldwyn actually ended up financially compensating him for several years after that. So, he got paid. Harold Russell, he got more than $6,000. He got more than just, all that. I mean, Samuel Goldwyn just loved him after the movie came out, obviously. And Samuel Goldwyn himself won 2 Oscars as well, because he won the award for Best Picture, but he also won the Irving Thalberg Award for Motion Picture Achievement and Excellence, because he had already been around for about 20 years making other films. One I saw, which was interesting, with Myrna Loy from 1931, called Aerosmith, about a doctor that goes in the middle of a plague to try to help people out, and Myrna Loy was a woman that he was having an affair with. But yeah, here we have Cathy O'Donnell showing up, approaching Harold Russell, who's been kind of avoiding her and dodging her her approaches and everything. This is just this entire sequence up when they go up to the bedroom is so masterful and so powerful. I mean, it just everything. It's perfect. It's a perfect sequence, and it every single testimony I've heard from people say they always walk out of this scene emotionally drenched. I mean, when I first saw it, I had nothing but tears throughout this whole sequence. Cathy O'Donnell was very young, and she had little acting experience. I mean, like Harold Russell, she was a complete ingenue. And that's part of the reason why I think they're so good together. Wyler knew exactly how to direct them so that they would have these very natural scenes together where they're just trying to eventually comfort each other. I don't want you to be tied down forever just because you think you have a kind heart. I mean, that's just, oh, that's devastating dialogue. It really is. And see, he starts to explain, you just don't know what it would be like. You don't know what the process is going to be, what the procedure is going to be. But also what he doesn't realize is that she's not the girl next door anymore. She's not the high school sweetheart when he left. She's a lot more mature now, and she knows exactly what he's going through, but he doesn't see it. He just doesn't grasp that yet. Yeah, they've been friends since childhood, which of course makes this even more impactful. I love this low shot right here of William Wyler going in, and we see both of them from below. And it should be noted, it should be emphasized right here and now that up until this point, in every single scene with Cathy O'Donnell, she never, ever once looks at Harold Russell's hooks. Not once. When she comes out of her house in the beginning, she doesn't notice them. She doesn't her eyes are never, ever, ever drawn to the hooks. It's almost like she pretends like they're not even there. The scene in the script is actually slightly different in that, little subtle differences, like he says about when I throw my hooks on the floor and everything. But this entire sequence is, of course, justly famous for the fact that here again, we hadn't really seen any disabled people on screen since Todd Browning's Freaks, and this was shocking stuff in '46. We didn't see stuff like this. Yeah, after she finally removes the hooks, that's when she finally looks down at what is left of his arms here. And everything he said is authentic. Everything he says here, he pretty much said in real life at some point or another. Like I said, Homer Parrish was Harold Russell in virtually every way. The subtle things of just, him, her, buttoning up his shirt, fixing his collar, the scenes of love and compassion that she has for him. She just wants to love him. That's all she wants. And this speech that he gives, this is when I know I'm helpless. My hands are down there on the bed. I can't put them on again without calling to somebody for help. Can't smoke a cigarette or read a book. That door should blow shut. I can't open it and get out of this room. I'm as dependent as a baby that doesn't know how to get anything except cry for it. We know that he's speaking for himself, and we know that he's said these words before. I mean, even an audience in 1946 was sophisticated enough to see that, this is all too real. That this was an overwhelming stuff to hear, and it's so emotional and so powerful. She finally kisses him, and for the only moment in the entire movie, she looks at the hooks. That's the only time in the entire movie that she looks at Harold Russell's hooks. She puts him away on a chair, doesn't even look back at him. And that's when Harold Russell finally realizes that she loves him and that she is going to be taking care of him. Both completely natural actors, very little acting experience from either one, and they both deliver one of the most emotionally powerful movies in American film history. That is astonishing. Just astonishing. And of course, the icing on the cake is, of course, Hugo Friedhofer's score. It's it's perfect. It's just perfect. This is all Wilma's theme that he's playing right here. And as she gives him the final kiss goodnight, she's going to be about to leave the room and then go back to her house. And luckily, I mean, I'm sure a lot of audience members were thinking the same thing. Like, is she going to remember about the door? Is she going to remember not to shut the door the entire way so that he won't be locked in? And she remembered. She remembered to leave the door ajar. And that's ultimately what leads Harold Russell to have tears in his eyes. They're going to be all right. They're going to be all right. That's that's the final assurance from the screenwriter after that scene. Now it's time to wrap up Virginia Mayo's storyline. And here again, up until this time, she has been a complete floozy. She hasn't understood or appreciated what her husband is going through, and what he experienced. And she just wants to go enjoy the nightlife every night, and doesn't want to be bothered by what her husband is going through at all. And so Dana Andrews finally comes home and discovers that she's been obviously seeing other men behind his back. It's all too obvious now at this point, and he's taking it with um, he's he's taking it surprisingly well and calm and collected as he is. But we know that you push him one moment and he might explode on you. Just look at the look on Dane Andrews' face as he looks at this guy. Another ex-serviceman. Yep. Have you had any trouble getting readjusted? Well, not in particular. I love the slap at him as he leaves. Be seeing you. No, I doubt it. I doubt it, man. We're not going to be seeing each other again. Oh, no, no, no. I know lots of people. What do you think I was doing all those years? She was doing plenty. Yeah, she was doing plenty. I love the fact that she assumes that just because he was overseas that he was having affairs. I gave up the best years of my life, and what have you done? Like, wow, just the utter disrespect and disconnect that this woman has with reality is unbelievable. In 1946, it was a shocker for anybody to say divorce in the movies. Let alone homewrecking. Now we got divorce on top of that. So, like I said, a very, very mature film from 1946. And, they say a lot of things that were just not uncommon at that time in motion pictures. And I love how all this is told visually as he removes the photograph and, sees him and Peggy together. Oh. I'm surprised I haven't lost my voice yet. Thank you, everybody, for staying with me and watching and everything. I mean, this commentary has been exhausting. The movie isn't exhausting, but the commentary certainly has on my voice and everything. We are at approximately 2 hours and 33 minutes. 2 hours and 33 minutes, which means we have approximately 17 minutes left to go in the best years of our lives. And just to let everybody know, I'm pretty much going to be shutting the stream off as soon as the movie is going to be over. But next, I wanted to announce next Sunday or Monday night. It's either going to be November 28th or November 29th. I will make an announcement very soon. But I will, in fact, be doing a commentary for Bob Fosse's Star 80 with Mariel Hemingway and Eric Roberts, where Mariel Hemingway plays Dorothy R. Stratton, a Playboy playmate who was murdered by her husband and manager in a jealous rage, from the director of All That Jazz and Cabaret. And with me for Star 80, I will have a very, very special guest, the director of Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. Adam Marcus will be joining me for this commentary. And the reason why I asked him is because apparently he confessed on his brand new Jason Goes to Hell commentary on the Shout Factory box set that apparently his favorite movie of all time is Bob Fosse's All That Jazz. So when I wanted to do a commentary for Star 80, I asked him, hey, you want to join me? And he's like, oh, absolutely. So we're going to be talking about Bob Fosse and many other many other things during the Star 80 commentary, but that will be next Sunday or next Monday. I will be making an official announcement soon. And here, once again, this actor playing Dana Andrews' father was very sadly blacklisted for this role. But he actually reads one of the citations for his medals, where we find out that despite intense pain, shock, and loss of blood, with complete disregard for his personal safety, Captain Derry crawled back to his bomb site and guided his formations on a perfect run over the objective and released his bombs with great accuracy. And a lot of this is very standard language from military letters and rewards. And so these words really resonate among military personnel in particular. This is how they do it. And this fade out as we go from the father in pretty much the exact same position of the screen as Dana Andrews is about to appear here. We see it fade out on this devastating look on the father's face, and right at that position, there's Dana Andrews looking at this massive plane graveyard, where all the planes that they used during the war are now dumped here to be separated and scrapped and eventually used to build other things. Now, during this sequence, I wanted to mention, there have been many movies that have dealt with PTSD, and none are more famous than this one. However, one that doesn't get mentioned nearly often enough, which I wanted to talk about here real quick, was in 1977, we, of course, had Star Wars. It was the #1 film of the year. Pretty much the first film since Best Years of Our Lives and Gone with the Wind to make a significant impact at the box office. Just real quick, I love this love on the plane here where it says round trip, but there's a question mark in between the round and the trip. And it's like, well, are they going to come back or are they not going to come back? But the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, didn't really get coined until early 1978, according to a medical journal, when the Vietnam vets were finally being diagnosed with a proper term other than being just simply shell-shocked, which is how they were described before. Well, only a few months before the term was coined, we had a movie in theaters in November of 1977 starring Henry Winkler as a Vietnam veteran with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he escapes from a New York VA hospital and travels cross-country on a mission to meet his other Vietnam veterans, his friends who are still alive, and start a worm farm. And along the way, he hooks up with Sally Field, who is on the run from her fiance when she decides to ditch him at the altar and not get married. Well, the movie is called Heroes, and it was actually written by a real-life Vietnam veteran by the name of James Karabatsos, who would later write in the 1980s. He wrote 2 other films about Vietnam, Heartbreak Ridge and Hamburger Hill. But of the 3 films that he wrote, this is my favorite. It was directed by Jeremy Paul Kagan. It was released by Universal in November of '77. And even though it was made for $3.5 million, it ended up making over 30 million. And so it was a sleeper success. And who happens to be in this movie but Harrison Ford, who was in Star Wars immediately before this, and that's obviously, I think, part of the reason why this became a box office hit. However, Universal had never shown it any appreciation on home video, and the reason being is the movie ends with Henry Winkler running from a house that he thought that his Vietnam friend was at, and he wasn't there. And Harrison Ford actually has only like 20 minutes of screen time, but he really makes up for the most of it in Heathers. I mean, not Heathers, Heroes. Excuse me. I can't believe I made that screw up. But anyway, the very last scene of the movie is Henry Winkler running and seeing bombs everywhere, people being killed, and he obviously thinks he's still in Vietnam, when in reality he's just running on the California streets. Well, and the movie concludes with this Kansas song, "Come Wayward Son," which Universal had removed from all the DVD releases. But it was finally put back onto the print in this Blu-ray, courtesy of Mill Creek Entertainment. It's very much a combination of Best Years of Our Lives and It Happened One Night, the Frank Capra movie from 1934, featuring Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. It's really a combination of those two movies in so many ways. And I'm also pleased to own the screenplay for Heroes, which I managed to pick up at the exact same place where I got the script for Best Years of Our Lives. And so, and like I said, an actual veteran wrote this, James Karabatsos. And so I couldn't help but mention it during this commentary and recommend it to all of you as one of the finest of its type, particularly when it deals with PTSD, and especially since Best Years of Our Lives came out in 1946. But this is the final scene of the whole movie, where we see Homer and Wilma get married. And we're still a little up in the air as to the relationship between Dana Andrews and Theresa Wright, which is going to be resolved, I think, in the most beautiful way you can imagine in a movie like this. Frederic March, he's still around. He's still drinking. He's still, ambivalent about that entire thing. But then again, at this point, it's almost treated as a dead issue. So if I must be a solitary drinker, good luck, kid. Oh, yeah. And so we have all the characters together again for this climactic sequence, which, it's funny is I've been to 3 weddings in my life, and I've never really want to go back to another wedding because you get into that mindset of like, well, wait a minute, when is this going to happen to me? Or I've never had a girl, so that's why I don't see the point in going to weddings when I see other people get married. And so it's funny, it's kind of ironic that my favorite movie of all time actually ends on a wedding, and I'm not really particularly fond of weddings as for what they are. Don't plan on ever attending another one ever again, let's put it that way. But Theresa Wright is wearing this beautiful big flowered hat, which is going to be the final thing that moves on screen as we close out the movie. And Fred found basically Fred is able to garner a job at the airport as they take all the planes apart to make prefabricated houses. And so Dana Andrews manages to get a job, very ironically enough, that, he flew these planes that are now being dismembered for other purposes. So, but at any rate, so Hoagy Carmichael is going to jump on the piano here, and on cue, we're going to wait for Cathy O'Donnell to make her appearance down the stairs and for the wedding to take place. As I said before, Rob Stevenson is nowhere to be found. I mean, because he was released from his contract, that's the reason why he's not in this final scene. Not to say that anybody misses him, but at the same time, it still clears up that question mark. And of course, here, yeah, the lovely Cathy O'Donnell coming down in the wedding dress, about to finally get married to the man that she loves. I read a story. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I read some story. Maybe it was on IMDb, for all I know. But apparently, the preacher was known in his local community as like a comedian or something. And so when he appeared on screen doing this, conducting this wedding ceremony, when the movie played in that hometown, it actually got nothing but laughter because they couldn't believe that he was playing this, this I mean, this is not even taking place in a church. It's taking place in Wilma's house. So, I mean, this is stripped of almost all, religion and politics, pretty much. Almost entirely, not entirely, but almost entirely. There's just hardly little of either in this movie, which here again, I greatly appreciate it. This shot right here, every single person can be seen clearly. Everybody's in focus, and they're all in a very specific position, so they could be shot by Greg Tolan and William Wyler, all in these specific positions. And I love how they still go by the script and say, take him by his right hand, even if he doesn't have a hand there anymore. The point is, just take him by his hand. That's all you have to do. Now, it seems absolutely seamless when Homer gets out the ring and he is about to put it on her finger. Not a moment of hesitation, not one shake. That was not just one take. There were several takes for that. But not necessarily because Harold Russell couldn't handle the ring. But as a matter of fact, in this... the essential companion piece for Best Years of Our Lives, for anybody that's interested, this is really the only thing out there, is this book by Sarah Kozloff, which is a BFI Film Classics companion book. And when she was doing her research, she actually found a letter in Samuel Goldwyn's archives of a marriage between an armless vet that had been done at the time. One more thing I want to mention, because I know the movie's about to end, but Olivia de Havilland was actually getting married to a Navy officer at this time. And also Myrna Loy was waiting to get married to her husband, who was her fiance, who was also a Navy officer. So couple of interesting connections there. And when all the procession moves forward, the one that doesn't move is Theresa Wright, standing very, very still, so perfectly still that she can't keep her eyes off Dana Andrews. They go together, they kiss, and we get these famous final words from Dana Andrews, where they'll probably have to work for the rest of their lives and be kicked around, but they're together, they're happy. And when I first saw this movie, I mean, I didn't want it to end. and I would have been happy if it kept on going for another 12 hours. That's how much I love The Best Years of Our Lives, and it's one of the great films of all time. It's not given near enough attention or discussion. We need a Blu-ray on the. We need a 4K or a extras, a full Blu-ray. Warner Archive will not do it. They've already released it twice, bare bones. They will never probably give it the treatment that it deserves, like Dodsworth or Mystery of the Wax Museum, where they were able to get funding to actually restore the movie and everything. But as of right now, even though people have been calling for it for years, there is still no ideal physical media release of The Best Years of Our Lives. So at any rate, that's The Best Years of Our Lives. I can't thank you enough for joining me throughout this 2 hour and 70-minute movie, 2 hours and 50 minutes. Yeah, there you go. For this very long, very powerful movie. I want to thank everybody who's been in the chat listening. Thank you, Cliff Booth. Thank you, Jinx Hart, Jamie Hart, Dying Breed, and Joe Bob Tarheel. Thank you so much for joining me for this commentary. And I hope to see you all next week for Star 80 with Adam Marcus. So take care, and thank you very much for coming. See you.